Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. welcome. So today I want to talk about something interesting. We're going to be talking about how do you know how much value something has? How do you know whether something is worth keeping to trade? How do you know the difference between something that is trash and something that is treasure? And that's kind of what I want to go over today, and it's a really complicated topic. The short answer, the really short answer, is experience. The more you play the game, the more you understand how the characters functions, how the abilities function, like which items are potentially useful to which particular characters, and how many people actually play those characters, you'll have a better understanding of like which items are valuable and which items aren't, and why they're valuable and why they aren't. To start out today, I'm going to start with a couple quizzes. So we're going to do a couple little quizzes here, and we're going to talk about specific items and why specific items are valuable and specific items aren't. So let's start with the phase blades. All right. So let's say you're running along and you find a superior phase blade, no sockets, just 15% enhanced with 3 attack rating. 50% enhanced and 3 attack rating seems like it's a really good base. But is it worth something? Is it trash or is it treasure? We have another one that dropped. It's 15% enhanced with 3 attack rating, and this one rolled 4 sockets. Is this one trash or is it treasure? And then finally we have the same thing that dropped, but it dropped with 5 sockets. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, they're all worth something, and you'd be right. They probably all have some value, some monetary value, but some of them are treasure, whereas some of them are not. And how do you tell the difference between them? Well, first off, one of the things that you have to know about superior items is that superior items cannot be socketed by using the Heraldric Cube. A lot of the regular bases, a non-superior base, for instance, something like this, can be socketed using your Heraldric Cube. So you can go into the Heraldric Cube, you can put this item into the cube. Of course, this one has 1 socket on it, so it's not socketable. But you can put that in the Heraldric Cube, and you can basically just roll it, right? And you can roll it for sockets. This particular item, however, cannot be rolled for sockets. It is a superior. And the only place that it can be socketed is at Larzik. If you put this in Larzik's window, he will always give it the maximum number of sockets that it's capable of, depending on the item level that you found it at, which can sometimes be relatively low. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't get 6 sockets, because it doesn't really take a very high item level, and phase blades don't really drop at a very low item level, so you're probably always going to get 6 sockets with this phase blade. Now, what could you potentially make in a 6-socket phase blade? Well, there's not a lot of really good options. In fact, pretty much the only option that you can put in a superior phase blade would be Last Wish, which is one of the most expensive runewords in the game. And is this trash or is this treasure? Well, it is valuable to the right buyer if you can find somebody rich enough, which usually means that they're spending real money trade. They're buying their runes, because the amount of runes that it would take to create a Last Wish is like, what is it, like Burr? I can't even remember the rune word right off the top of my head. It's like some crazy combination of runes. Here, let's see. Last Wish, D2R. It is Ja Mal, Ja Sir, Ja Burr. That's right, you heard that. 3 Ja runes, a Burr rune, a Sir rune, and a Mal rune. The Mal rune being the lowest rune in the rune word. So, does it have value? It has a little bit of value. To the right buyer, it could potentially be worth something. You're going to sit on it for a while, though. Because, well, you know, not a lot of people have Ja Mal, Ja Sir, Ja Burr just sitting around waiting for a Last Wish base. Now, this problem is known as, and it can be very eloquently stated, as a supply and demand, right? So the issue here is that Last Wish is in low supply. And the reason why it's in low supply is because it's effing expensive. Right? So nobody really makes it until they're super rich. And in general, an item like this just has no value early on in the game. It's something maybe that you could potentially hold on to if you just want to hold on to it on a mule and try and trade it off eventually to somebody who's trying to make a perfect last wish or something. But it has no value like at the beginning of a ladder, and it's probably not going to have much value toward the like middle of a ladder either, because most people don't really have jaw mal, jaw sir, jaw burr just laying around. Now, what could you eventually get for it? Well, you could probably eventually get something for it. Like you could probably snag maybe a ohm low, something like that. It depends on how desperate the person is or how stupid the person is. Some of these people go on these RMT websites and they'll buy like 40 burr runes for like a specific price, and they might even throw a burr rune into your lap in this particular case, and only really because they're just desperate for the base that they have paid all the money for the runes for, that they don't have the base. If they're smart enough to even know that this is like the actual proper base that you would use for a last wish. So an interesting thing here is that this is definitely a good base, but not one that you're going to get any money out of really early on in the ladder. Something you could hang on to as like an investment project. Now, the reason why supply and demand comes in here is that the base itself, so the superior 15% enhanced plus 3 AR base is actually in high supply. So it is rare, don't get me wrong, but it is not rarer than the Last Wish people who are creating Last Wishes. Think about it like this. In an entire season, you might have like 50 or 60 of these drop across like the entire community. Maybe even more than that. Maybe even like 120 to 240 across the entire community. And you might have like I don't know, maybe like 100 or so people make last wishes, maybe a little bit more than that if people are really spending some cash that season. But it just tends to be one of those situations where there will be more of these than there are of people actually making last wishes. Moving on to the next one, we have the Superior Phase Blade with 4 sockets. Now, the Superior Phase Blade with 4 sockets can't be rolled anything else. It's stuck at 4, right? So it is a 4 socket only item. Well, what can you put in a 4 socket item? Well, the easiest way to look at this is to go and check to see what you can actually put in a 4 socket phase blade. One of the websites I like to go to for this is Diablo2.io. They have a nice little rune word calculator here, where you can basically pull up the rune sockets. You can put in required sockets 4 right here. And then once you put in required sockets 4, you can go to item group. Now you have to be careful with this because you're going to have to choose multiple item groups because there are multiple recipes for multiple different item groups. For instance, you can choose all weapons, which is going to be Hand of Justice and Passion. So it could have a little bit of a usefulness there for a Hand of Justice person or a Passion player. And then you can also go to melee weapons specifically, which we have nothing. And then you can go to swords specifically, which is right here. Which you have Spirit. Spirit is a relatively common rune word. Nobody's going to pay for a Phase Blade base for that because it's a bad weapon for meleeing. Voice of Reason, also not really the greatest weapon for physical damage, although Phase Blades are a decent choice, but you wouldn't really want a 15% enhanced base for a Voice of Reason because it doesn't have any physical damage anyway. Kingslayer might be a halfway decent choice. And then there's Oath, but you would never make an Oath in a Phase Blade. You would want an Ethereal base because it is indestructible. So you're pretty much only down to Hand of Justice. So in the case of before, when we're talking about supply versus demand, Hand of Justice is a low demand item. This is a low demand item because the problem is that you just generally don't have a lot of people building Hand of Justice builds. And the base is probably going to be in higher supply than the demand for that base, which means that you might get like an Ist rune for this base. If you're lucky. Maybe even a little bit less than that. You might be looking at more like a Mal. And this really just comes down to the fact that Hand of Justice, which is probably the main rune word that you would make in this base, looking at all the different rune words that you can potentially make, is just not really common enough of a rune word made by enough people within the community to really get you a huge, like, messaging spree of people like coming after this item. And these will drop enough that people will just leave them on the ground. Like the 4-socket bases, because they don't really sell very much, because they're not really a high demand item, you might not even see them up there, or even if you do, they might not sell. So let's move on to the third one. The third one is a 5-socket phase blade. All right. So 5-socket phase blade can make what? It can make a grief, which is a pretty powerful item. So let's change this to 5 sockets. And let's go back to our rune words, and we're going to go to swords. So we've got death. You wouldn't put a death in here because death is indestructible. You'd want to put that in an indestructible ethereal base. You have grief, which grief definitely could go in here, and it would be a very good base for grief. In fact, the best base for grief because it has the attack rating and the enhanced damage, which does in fact add to the total damage of the weapon. It doesn't add to this damage, but I mean that doesn't matter. It still adds to the base damage of the weapon, just like all enhanced damage does. Destruction could potentially be made in there, so you've got another base. It's kind of an expensive one. CTA could potentially be made in there, but I don't really know why you would want to make CTA in that base, but definitely not the best base for that particular purpose. And then these don't really matter over here. So in general, is this one worth something? Yes. Now, going back to the supply and demand, this is a high demand item because people are making griefs left and right. So if you're a smiter and you want a grief, if you're a barbarian that does like trav runs and you want a grief, a zeal paladin and you want a grief, there are a lot of characters that can use griefs, even if you're just making it for a mercenary. You can put grief on a mercenary with this particular item. There is a lot of demand for this particular base because there is a lot of demand for the grief actual rune word, right? So this particular base, and this is single player, by the way, guys. Don't get mad that I'm throwing these items on the ground. But this base would potentially be worth something. You probably could pick up easy, low ohm, if not burr. If you're lucky, if you really hang in there, you could probably grab a burr for this particular base. It is a perfect grief base. And it is going to make your grief even better. This is the kind of base that you would literally roll griefs in like over and over and over again to try and get a perfect 400 with the 40% increased attack speed. So you're trying to get like that absolutely god tier grief base. So you'd be looking for, like the 400 on this roll right here and the 40% on this roll. And then I think the other one that you look for is the damage to demons. Is it this one? I can't remember. There's also life after kill, which is not a bad one either. There's basically like tiny little modifiers that you can potentially get other than that, but a perfect grief with a 40% increased attack speed and a 400 damage is definitely something that you would want to roll in this base, and then you would have essentially one of the most valuable griefs in the game. Now, moving on to another base type, let's talk about another one. So we're going to look at a couple different shields here, and we're going to talk about these shields and why some of these shields are worth something and some of these shields are not, right? Unfortunately, I don't think there's any other way to do it other than this, because I really need to impress upon you why specific things are worth money and why specific things are not, right? So we have a 3-socket ethereal, or not ethereal, 3-socket superior vortex shield with 45 all res, 15% enhanced defense, and 10% maximum durability. Now, 3 sockets is not enough to make a spirit, but it is enough to make other bases. There's actually a couple different bases that you can make in this. You can make a sanctuary, which is not exactly the best, but you could also make a dream. As a dream base, this is probably one of the best dream bases out there. Superior Vortex Shield gives you the highest smite damage. You also get the maximum amount of all resistances, and it comes with 3 sockets. Now, why would it coming with 3 sockets matter in this particular case? Well, the reason why it matters in this particular case is that if you are trying to get 3 sockets, you cannot roll 3 sockets, as we talked about earlier, in a superior base, right? So this is another one of those situations where we have a shield with the 3 sockets and the mods that we're looking for, so it's come in the right configuration. How much could you get for this particular shield? I would have to take a guess, but I would probably say easy, low, plus. I would put it in the Sir Burr category, probably. If not even multiple burrs, depending on the season. So, like, it's going to fluctuate depending on how rich people are during that particular season. But somebody who wants to make a god tier dream shield for their paladin is going to be willing to invest in a good base, and this is definitely a very good base for a dream paladin. Now, what other shields could you potentially make in this? There's not a lot. So if we take a look at 3 socket shields, you'll see that shields have Dragon, which is, well, Dragon is also 3 sockets, now that I look at it. So Dragon, Dream, we've got Ancient's Pledge, Sanctuary, which is the high res shield. Not exactly the most crazy one, but Dream and Dragon can both go in this base. And then you look at the regular shields. Yeah, well, so that's pretty much it, right? Some problems, though. So here's some problems with this particular thing. So going back to the supply and demand, right? So is this a good base? Yes. Is it rare? Yes. Is it valuable? Yes. Is the demand for it high? No. So the amount of people that like to make Dream and Dragon setups is actually a lot lower than you would think. Especially with the newer seasons where the native paladins are much cheaper and easier to set up than the Dream and Dragons. Although the Dream and Dragons still work, don't get me wrong, you can make the builds way cheaper now. You don't have to spend like multiple Burr runes, multiple Jaw runes, and whatnot to create the setup, right? So you're not always stuck with the Dream and Dragons anymore like you used to be back in the day. If you wanted to do like Holy Fire or Holy Shock, you pretty much had no choice. Because you couldn't break immunities otherwise, because that allowed you to run your Conviction and your Holy Shock or Holy Freeze or Holy Fire, with each other. Of course, there was one Holy Freeze option, but it wasn't that great. In general, though, with this particular item, the demand is going to be low. Especially early on in the latter season, you're not going to have a lot of people pining, like knocking down your door for this particular item. It may come later on. It's going to be similar to the Last Wish Phase Blade. It's 6 sockets, it's perfect, and it's what somebody would want for a Last Wish. But look at the runes that are required for a dragon. Sir Low. Look at the runes that are required for Dream. Jaw. Right? So these are expensive rune words that if you find this item and you hold on to it for a little while, yes, you will eventually find a buyer. And you're probably going to get, like I said, probably somewhere around low ohm, maybe Burr runes if you're lucky, depending on the season and how rich people are in that particular season. So let's move on to the next one. Of course, I ended up with 1 socket in this particular shield. So here we have a Superior Crown Shield with 15% enhanced, and it has all res 45. And it doesn't even really matter that it has 1 socket in it. It can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 for the context of this particular discussion, because they're pretty much all the same. Does this item have value? Not really. It's a self-wheeled item that you could potentially sell for maybe like a Pull rune, Co-rune, or something if you're lucky. It's used on low-level characters essentially. It's a twink shield. It's a like a power leveling item. It's something that you'd put on a low-level character to beef them up and make them stronger. But it's not an endgame item. It's not something that you would use toward the end of the game at all, because in general, you're going to want higher smite damage. You're going to want higher defense. You're going to want other stats which are not going to be present on the Crown Shield. Now, why aren't they present on the Crown Shield? Because the Crown Shield is the wrong base type. So, as an example, if you look at this shield, this is a Vortex Shield. It has a defense of 258, and it has a level requirement of level 66. This has no level requirements, well, level 18, and it only has a strength requirement of 65. This is a normal quality shield. It's a low-level shield. It's a baby shield. It's a baby shield for baby paladins. It's good for that particular purpose. It's something that you would hang on to for yourself or for your friends when you're doing like a new character day or just leveling up, with some buddies. But the thing is it doesn't really have much trade value. So is it trash or is it treasure? It's basically trash, but useful trash. Moving on to the next item, we have a vortex shield that rolled enhanced. And I'm pretty sure I set this one to 0 sockets. That was my intention anyway. Now, if I had set this to 0 sockets, it would be a superior vortex shield with no sockets. And this means that a superior vortex shield with no sockets is always going to default to 4 if you take it to Larzik. Now, the reason why this is important is because then you are stuck with only 4-socket runewords. So what 4-socket runewords could you potentially put in a vortex shield? Well, if we look at the shield recipes for 4-socket recipes, you'll see that we have Phoenix, which is Vex Vex Low Jaw. We have Exile, which is Vex Ohm Ist Dol. And we have Spirit, which is Tal Thul Ort Am. So we have 1, 2, 3, but we'd have to take Exile out of the running because it's a rep durability. Why wouldn't you make Exile in this shield? Because you generally want an ethereal shield for Exile. That's pretty much how that works. So if this did have 0 sockets and you took it to Larzik for 4, it would be worth a lot because you could potentially put a lot of nice runes in it. You could put Phoenix, you could put Spirit, you could just use it as a placeholder shield for your Haas until you get one later. And what would this sell for? Easy, probably low, maybe even Sir. Depending on the ladder, you might even get Burr for it. If it has 1 socket, like the one that you see on the screen right now, the 1-socket versions of these are going to be basically trash. They can't be fixed. So once you have 1 socket in them, unfortunately, no matter how good the shield is, at 45 all-res and 15% enhanced, it's essentially garbage if it has 1 socket in it because it can't be re-rolled. Then we have another shield here, which I'm pretty sure I also set to 0 sockets. I don't know why it's doing this to me. I knew I set it to 0 sockets in the hero editor before I started. I probably still have the hero editor open. Let's check and see if I am a fool. Am I a fool? Look at this. Crown Shield, 0 sockets. Says it right there. Royal Shield, 0 sockets. Says it right there. Vortex Shield, 0 sockets. Says it right there. I did my due diligence, and I am upset that the game is messing with me. So this was supposed to be a 0 socket item, and would this potentially be valuable? Well, it's going to default to 4 sockets. Royal Shields are not horrible, but they don't have the highest smite damage, and that's one of the biggest issues. If you compare it to a Vortex Shield, you see it has 5 to 87 smite damage. If you compare it to a Crown Shield has 4 to 12, whereas the Royal Shield only has 24 to 32 smite damage. In general, the Royal Shield and the Crown Shield are going to be the losers in smite damage over the elite bases. So in general, the Royal Shields can be useful to a character when they're leveling up, and you could potentially get like a Ko or something for it if it had 4 sockets, because of course you could make a Spirit in that, and it is a good placeholder Spirit, and you might even get an Ist for it if you're lucky, but because it's not an elite base, it's not going to maintain the same value as one that's not. And you might be asking, well, how can you tell the difference between an elite base and a exceptional base and a normal base? Well, the easiest way to do that is the level requirement. Most normal bases do not have a level requirement. Some normal bases do, but most of them do not. And even if they do have a level requirement, normal bases generally tend to be extremely low. As you can see from the Superior Crown Shield, it has a normal quality base of, level 18, right? So this is a very low level base item. You can also tell by the defense. You see the defense on the Superior Crown Shield is only 46, whereas the defense on the Royal Shield is 208 and the Vortex is 258. That's another good indicator is the defense and the damage and things like that. There's a lot of various ways that you can tell. The Royal Shield has a level requirement of 41, and the Vortex Shield has a level requirement of 66. So as you're going through and you're looking at these items and you're trying to figure out, well, what's a normal base, and what's an exceptional base, and what's an elite base. I have a whole video going over this, by the way. If you want to take a look at that, it's in a separate video, and we'll save that for something else. But it is important to know the value of an item, because if you don't know the base types, well, then you're going to be looking at the wrong items, and you're not going to be knowing, like, hey, this item isn't worth anything because it's not an elite base, or this item isn't worth anything because it's an elite base. I know I'm blowing your mind. Let's move on to the next one, which is bows. So in this particular case, I'm pretty sure I also set these to 0 sockets. Yes, 0, 4, 4, and 0. Yes. So all the ones that are 1 socket are supposed to be zeros. So we're going to look at these together. So we have a non-superior, 3+ skills, Amazon only, with 0 sockets. Is this worth anything? The answer is no. And you might be asking, well, why not? Well, if you take it to Larzik will guarantee you 5 sockets, which is not exactly the particularly most valuable base. 5 sockets is a mist bow, which could be okay if you have a Chamaroon laying around, but nobody's really going to pay you much for a +3 non-superior 5-socket Grand Matron bow. If you roll it in the Herodric Cube and you get 4 sockets, then you have something that's valuable. You could potentially make a faith bow in there. You could make there's actually, you know what? There's actually like a really large number of 4-socket bows. So instead of just rattling them off, let me pull them up here so you can actually see them. So there is the brand bow, which is Jalo Malgul. There's the ice bow, which is really good for the freezing Arizons at Amshale Jalo. Faith is Om Jalem Eld. And you got Insight, which is Raltier Tal Sol, super cheap, really nice meditation aura, and pretty good for early game. There's Wrath, which nobody makes, and there's Harmony, which is actually pretty decent because it has the Vigor aura on it. I actually love to make the Vigor aura for my characters. In general, there's quite a few good bow bases that you could make in this bow. So if you did roll 4 sockets, do you have something that's valuable then? Sort of. A regular non-superior +3 with 4 sockets has value. Probably around like Ist, maybe Gull if you're lucky. You're probably not going to get much more than that. And this has to do with the fact that, well, it's not superior. Superior bows are what you're kind of looking for with stuff like that. There's also some of these bases you don't really want to make in a Grand Matron bow. So you really wouldn't want to make an ice bow in a Grand Matron. You'd preferably want to make those in matriarchal bows because they're faster. Faith bows definitely go in Grand Matron, and brand bow can go in Grand Matron, or it can go in matriarchal, depending on what you're focusing on, whether it's the damage or the Bone Spear proc, which I've done both. Harmony doesn't really matter, whichever one you want. It's just a buff stick anyway. So is it valuable? Sort of. It's not trash and it's not treasure, but it's definitely some pocket change that you can keep around. All right. Moving on to the next one, we have a +3 non-superior 4-socket that just rolled that way, right? So it's the same thing as the one we had before. It already rolled 4 sockets, so that's good. We don't have to invest any currency in it to roll it, so there's no possibility, essentially. With the other one, unfortunately, you have a possibility of getting something good. And it's actually a chance between, what is it, like 1 in 6? Or 1 in 5? Is it 1 in 5? Or is it? Yeah. I think it still is 1 in 6 because I think the other 2 still roll. So how it works is if it rolls 6, it goes to 5. If it rolls 5, it goes to 5. So there's a 2 out of 6 chance that it will be a 5-socket bow. A 1 out of 6 chance it will be a 4-socket. And if you add it all up, what is that? 2. So it's like 5 out of 6 chance that it will be not a 4-socket bow. Right? So this is a chance at a 4-socket bow, and this is actually finding a 4-socket bow, which is going to be a lot more valuable to you in general. It's just going to be something that you can actually utilize right away. You can make an insight in it, and then later on you could potentially trade it off to somebody for something valuable. Now, if any of these bows roll anything other than +3 skills, so the +3 rolls between +1 and +3. Right? So this is something that you're going to be looking for, right? If it doesn't have +3, it's immediately garbage. Like nobody is going to want to make a high-end base item, like Faith, for instance, which is Om Ja Lem Eld. So 2 high runes and 1 mid rune. Nobody's going to want to invest 2 high runes and a mid rune in a bow that only has +2 skills, right? So that's the first consideration that you have to think of is, does it have at least +2 skills? So every time you see one of these drop, a Grand Matron or a Matriarchal bow, you pick it up and the first thing you do is you go, does it have +3? All right, you're like, yeah, it does. Okay. How many sockets does it have? How many sockets can it have? Can I roll it? Is it superior? Blah, 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 blah. And you're going to run through the numbers and you're going to figure out what to do with it. Next, we have a... Is this just the same one? That's the same one. All right, so next we have a superior Grand Matron bow with 4 sockets. Now, this is extremely valuable. Very valuable. It is a treasure item. Now, why is this a treasure item? The reason why this is a treasure item is because you cannot craft a 4-socket, 15% enhanced, +3 skill Grand Matron bow. The reason is because superior items, as we talked about earlier, cannot be put in the cube, right? So this was supposed to be 0, as I showed you guys earlier. This superior Grand Matron bow with 15% enhanced is supposed to be 0 sockets. So treat this as 0 sockets. I know it didn't roll that way. I'll try to do better next time. I'll figure out what the bug is. In this particular case, when you have this particular bow, the reason why this is not valuable is because if you take it to Larzik, it goes to 5, right? Well, what is 5 good for? 5 is good for Mist. Mist is okay. It's not the most crazy item in the world. You might be able to get like an Ist for this base if you're lucky. Maybe a little bit less. It depends on if anybody is actually willing to make a Mist bow. Why do people generally not want to make Mist bows? Well, because Faith is better. The investment for Mist isn't really the highest at a Chamrune, but if you're going down that road anyway, you might just well spend that Chamrune on your superior Grand Matron bow. So in retrospect, between these two bases, which one's more valuable? Well, this one, the 4-socket 15% enhanced, is way more valuable than the 15% enhanced +3 with 5 sockets. And the reason why is because of the bases, right? So you can make so many runewords in 4 sockets, but you can't make so many runewords in 5 sockets. If we take a look at 5 sockets, you literally see the only bow on the list is Mist. That's it. Now, does Mist have purpose? Yes. There are some good uses for Mist, and I have used Mist myself in a couple builds, but I would not pay nearly as much for this base as I would for this one. Now, this one, how much is this base worth? You're talking Baroons, probably, depending on the season. You might even get like 2 or 3, especially if it has +3 AR. If you got +3 AR in there, that skyrockets it a little bit higher, and then people are going to be trying to roll a perfect Faith base in this particular bow. So they might even just like, the base itself might actually be worth more than the runes to actually create the Faith bow. I'm going to go prepare some more things here, and we're going to talk about some more stuff. All right, I have a couple things gathered here on my sorceress, and we're going to be talking about them. The first thing we're going to be talking about is this particular bad boy right here, which is a 6% Magic Find Small Charm. Do 6% Magic Find Small Charms have value? Even a 7%. Do 7% Magic Find Small Charms have value? Not really. The problem with 7% Magic Find Small Charms is that they don't have anything else on them. Blue items can have 2 modifiers. And any blue item without 2 modifiers is not going to be valuable in the least. Could you get something for it, maybe? Trade a perfect amethyst or something? Or maybe even try and finagle like a co-rune out of it? Perhaps. But the moral of the story is that most charms in the game tend to be only worth something if you have an additional stat. Now, let's take a look at one that probably is worth something, which is this one right here. Now, the difference between them is very minor. This is 1% Magic Find better, but it has a secondary modifier of 10 to mana. Now, 7% is the maximum roll that you can get for a small charm. 17 mana, I believe, is the maximum mana that you can get on a small charm. So if you have a perfect one of these, it would be a 7% magic find 17 mana small charm. And in that case, you would probably have something worth probably up to a low rune, if not maybe even a Sur. I'm actually not exactly sure of the exact price on that, but it would be expensive. And the reason for this is not because 7% magic find is really valuable. The reason is because of the combo. Now, blue items tend to be worth more and more and more because of the combo. The more combination of effects they have on them, the better they tend to be worth. For instance, a Fire Skills Sorceress Large Charm is a skiller, and skillers, they're valuable in a very minute way. Depending on the class, some are more valuable than others, where some of them are completely and utterly worthless, like a Curse's Necromancer charm, or like a offensive Paladin skiller, which nobody really seems to want. And I think me and the Kinship probably are the only ones that buy them for fun builds like the Holy Shock and Holy Freeze Paladins and Holy Fire Paladins and stuff. But for the most part, like a charm like this that doesn't have any secondary stat tends to be less valuable than ones that do. There are lots of other secondary stats that you can get on here. You can get +6 dexterity, +6 strength. You can get +2 life, up to 45 life, in fact. A +1 fire skiller with 45 life would be insanely valuable. You would have something worth burr runes at that point. And this is kind of where I'm trying to go with this, is that when it comes to blue items, especially charms, most of the time it has to do with the combination of effects, not necessarily the like individual value. And I'll show you some more examples of this as we go along. I have some other stuff that I want to show you on this character, though. For instance, we have these. So if you took a look at these and you're like, those are pretty nice. Are they worth anything? So do they have a trade value? The answer to that question is that minimally. I mean, somebody would probably pay something for them, maybe Ist, maybe Gull. If I was lucky, maybe Vex. But they're not going to be like burr rune, like multiple burr rune value. What would push them over the edge into multiple burr rune value? Well, two things would have to change on this particular item to push it into the multiple burr rune value. One, it would have to have a third resistance. So one of the easiest ways for this to be pushed over into that category would be for it to have, instead of 32% or 63% extra gold for monsters, it could either have, number one, a really high magic find roll, or number two, it could have lightning resistance specifically. Unfortunately, if it's poison resistance, most people don't want it, because poison resistance tends to be the least valued resistance in the game. Other than that, these boots were very close, very, very close to being just godlike in general. Let me show you a ring as well. I have a ring I'm going to show you. Give me just a second. All right, so here we have a ring that I got in the Soul Self-Found, which means it has no value because it's in Soul Self-Found, but that's besides the points. So this particular ring is called the Ravenhold ring. It's a rare ring. It has +5 to minimum damage, which is pretty decent, actually. 123 attack rating, which is actually really high. It's actually higher than you're actually normally able to get on a ring, and I'll explain why. 3% life leech, which is kind of low, but the presence of life leech at all is definitely appreciated. It also has cold resistance of 30%, which means it actually rolled a 20% cold res modifier, and it rolled a 10% all res modifier on top of that. And then at the bottom there, you see the +3 light radius, which is actually a combo mod, which increases the attack rating even more. That's the reason why it's 123 attack rating instead of a lower value, because it rolled 2 attack rating mods together. Now, is this item valuable? A little bit. You could probably pick up like easy Gullvex for it. It's missing some of the modifiers that it would need to be truly godlike. First off, the life leech would need to be higher. Second, it really could have used dual leech. Dual leech would have made this into a absolutely mint ring. If it had gotten, say, like just even like a 4% mana leech, it would have really pushed it over the top and made it extremely valuable. That dual leech would have really made it work. Cold res is a decent res, but the 20% extra could have potentially rolled on one of the better reses like lightning or fire. Not that cold res is terrible, mind you, and it could be particularly useful for any character who is obviously suffering from negative cold res, like a Holy Freeze Paladin, a Holy Freeze, or a Freezing Arrow Amazon, or various other characters. But a ring like this is really good. So why is a ring like this really good? Again, it's the combo of effects. It's not because it has high attack rating, because if that were the case, then you could just sell every platinum ring for a burr rune. It's not because it has life leech. It's not because it has all res. It's not because it has high cold res. It's because of all of them together. It's because you ended up with every single mod in combination, right? So it's the fact that you have the AR, which is very important for melees. And honestly, most melees cannot use rings that do not have attack rating on them, because if they do, they pretty much just won't be able to hit anything. It has Life Leech, which allows you even the tiniest amount of Life Leech. Even 3% Life Leech is enough for good melee characters, physical damage melee characters, to be able to push through. It's not a big deal. As long as you have it, it's better than not having it. In fact, I can't really say that having huge amounts of Life Leech, unless you're getting into like the 100% range, is really that beneficial to your character over, like something else that could potentially help you, like more damage. Because more damage also means more Life Leech. Which again, 5 minimum damage, more damage. All res. So the 10 all res is very nice. It's a very nice stat in general. My apologies, I'm still getting over strep throat. I'm trying my best today. I'm struggling. 10 is really nice, but it's not perfect. It's 11, I think, is perfect. If you ever want to know like what is perfect and what is not when you're looking at modifiers, there are websites you can go to that will kind of teach you this thing, and you can see the different modifiers like prefixes and suffixes. If you just type in D2R, like prefixes and suffixes, there's one in particular that I like to go to that has like the best list of all the mods. It's this one right here. I'm not sure how accurate it is to Diablo 2 Resurrected specifically, but it's on the fandom, and you can search for them here. So, like for instance, let's do all resistances, and we come up with 11% rainbow modifier, rare rings level 56. Now, another thing that I want you to notice about this ring is its level requirement. Now, level requirement can increase the value of an item tremendously. In fact, when I was showing you guys the boots earlier on this particular girl right here, you may have noticed that the level requirement on these boots is only level 29, right? There are low-level dueling communities within Diablo 2 that search for specific items that have a lower level. So when you look for items, or when you're looking at an item, just because an item doesn't seem good to you as a high-level character doesn't necessarily mean that an item isn't good for a lower-level character in those low-level dueling brackets. And I'm pretty sure the brackets are something like 9, 15, 30, and I can't remember what the last one is. I think it's like, I want to say it's 48, but I could be wrong. But low-level dueling is generally around 30. So when you're looking at looking for low-level dueler equipment, there is specific pieces of equipment that are extremely valuable in the low-level dueler community, and that's a whole topic unto itself. Let's go take a look at a couple more of my characters, and we're going to pick out some more items and basically show you why they're valuable. So we're going to go to, let's just pick a character at random here. I don't know if there's any good on that character. Let's try this one. Actually, she does have a infinity, a self-wheeled infinity. All right. So here we have an Astrion's Iron Ward. This is my Astrion's Iron Ward for my North Star Spider. And there's Chunk's ear. I got Chunk's ear, got Chunk's ear. I got Chunk's ear, got Chunk's ear. Today, a D. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm keeping that though. It's my ear. Level 99 too. I got his level 99 paladins here. I dueled him for it. I killed him with my North Star. He said I was bad manners. And he gonna say it too. Be like, yeah, you are bad manners. All right, so let's look at the Astrion's Iron Ward. So what makes an Astrion's Iron Ward valuable and what makes it not valuable, right? Well, if you're doing a North Star Smiter, what makes it valuable is +4 combat skills. It rolls between +2 and +4. So if it's not +4, it's immediately not the greatest. It also rolls the damage bonus, the damage +81 that you see right here. You see that right there, the damage +81. That is grief damage. It's the same damage that's on a grief, it's just less of it. And that is also very important as well if you're trying to do the North Star Smiter, because that gives you a huge damage bonus on your smite. And that rolls, I think, as high as, I think it's 84, I want to say. I could be wrong, but I think it's 84. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for like a max grief damage +4 combat skills Astrions for this particular build. Is that valuable? Yes. You're probably going to get a good price for it. Maybe like Vex, Ohm, maybe low if you're lucky. Now, a perfect Astrions, perfect non-ethereal or perfect ethereal, with like +4 and perfect grief damage and perfect enhanced and perfect all, like every stat is perfect. The bonus attack rating is perfect. Like those things are ridiculously valuable. Good luck on even selling them. I don't even know if anybody's gonna have enough money for them. You're talking multiple birds at that point. It's a low demand item though. So going back to our original thing, like how in demand is a perfect ethereal Astrions? Not as in demand as you would think. But the supply is very low. Extremely low, actually. Good luck actually even finding a perfect ethereal Astrions. So good luck even finding an ethereal Astrion at that. I have not found a lot of Astrions, but like when they do actually fall, hopefully there'll be +4 skills for you, because it's very sad when they're not. Let's talk about some of these other items. So I've got combat skillers here. Plain combat pally skillers. Are these worth anything? Yes, they are. Because Paladin combat skills is pretty much the best skiller for the Paladin, bar none, there is a very high demand for combat pally skills. Are they worth a lot with nothing on them, just plain combat skillers? They're not worth a ton, but you're definitely going to at least pick up like Ist, Gull, maybe even Vex, even for planes, depending on how many people are working that season. Because like the demand for them can be extremely high. Hammerdins want them, North Star Smiters want them, Zealers want them. I mean, there's tons of characters that can get good use out of combat skillers. Faux Paladins want them. Pretty much all the good skills on the Paladin are in this tree. Yes, there are some good auras in the offensive tree, but at the end of the day, it's just not worth pumping the auras unless you're doing Holy Freeze, Holy Fire, or Holy Shock. Meow, meow, meow. Meow, meow, meow. Meow, 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 meow. All right, so this is worth something, but how about a +1 with some other effect, right? So going back to what we were talking about earlier about charms that have something else on them, right? So if they have something else on them, then they become much more valuable. This is just a general consensus across the board by most players, is that once you have a +1 pally, you already have something that's mildly valuable because it is a high demand item, but once you start adding in other modifiers, 7% faster run walk, 12% faster hit recovery, plus 6 dexterity, plus 6 strength, 45 to life, which is the most valuable one. Those additional modifiers on the skiller is going to give it more value. And so when you find, like, you're running along and let's say you're killing demons, like blah 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 blah, die demons, blah 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 blah, and you're like, oh, something dropped, or lion branded. Oh, it's so pretty. And you pick it up and you're like, +1 paladin. It's so beautiful and I love it. It's good. It's amazing. It's a nice find, right? But it's not as amazing as a +145. +145 is game changing. You're talking multiple burr runes at this particular point, right? It's the combination of the effects for the charms that makes them valuable, not the effects themselves. Like this all res 5. It's nice. It's a nice charm. I might get like an Ist rune for it, maybe. Maybe a little bit less. I don't know. It depends. If the all res 5 had rolled with something else, like all res 5 20 life. I actually can't even roll 20 life with all res 5. I don't even remember. Do I got a life charm in here? Do I even have one in here somewhere? I don't even know if I do. Ooh, that's a beautiful one right there. That's a fine small charm, which is a +3 max damage, although it rolled low on the AR at +10. It goes up to 20. And instead of rolling the 3-20-20, which is your fine small charm of life, it rolled 3% faster run walk, which isn't terrible either. Having run walk on your charms isn't awful, especially if you're going for a run walk build. And same thing here. So 36 AR is the highest you can get for a steel charm. And then it also has 3% faster run walk, which makes it worth something. A 36 steel charm by itself isn't really worth anything. And a 3% faster run walk charm by itself isn't really worth anything. But a 36 attack rating at 3% faster run walk could potentially get you something like an Ist or something like that. It depends on the value of how many people are running that particular season. Here's another good one right here. This is a shocking small charm. So shocking small charm is 1 to 58. This is a very high number. Lightning charms, especially if you're doing things like my Thor build, are extremely valuable. But the thing is that getting the really, really good ones requires you to have both mods. The only way to get the really good ones is to have a shocking small charm with the additional modifier of the extra lightning damage. And we can go back to this website real quick and I'll show you what I mean. So if we go to lightning damage, small charms, right? So we get static at 6 to 11. We get 12 to 24. What's the highest we can get on a small charm? So 44 to 71 is the highest, which is the shocking. So this particular one rolled 58, which is a mid-roll in between 44 and 71. So the higher roll would have been the 71 roll, which is what you would want. But this is not the end of this particular charm. So 71 is only the prefix, and then we also get the suffix. So the suffix is the other side of the equation, which gives us the of storms, I believe is what it is, shocking small charm of storms, which can go as high as 28, right? So if we add those two numbers together, we end up with a 71 plus 28, which I believe is 99. Yes. So you end up with a 99 lightning damage small charm. So how much is the 99 lightning damage small charm worth versus this 1 to 58? Well, the 1 to 58 might get you like a co-rune or something if you're lucky. Maybe an Ist if somebody's desperate. The 1 to 99, on the other hand, is probably worth a burr. Yeah. So understanding how items can potentially be valuable like this, how the combination, the confluence of two things comes together to make something worth money is important. See if I can find any more in here. So here's a good example of one. This is a bad combination. So fire resistance 11% is a good mod. That is a perfect modifier. Doesn't get any better than that. So that is a ruby small charm. And those are actually really handy because spirit shields don't come with fire res. So a lot of the times you do need to cover that fire res that's not on the spirit shield for a lot of various classes. Also, if you're using a fire sunder. Now, the other one, the other side, the suffix, is +2 dexterity. Not exactly the greatest roll. If it had rolled mana, if it had rolled life, it had rolled all sorts of various things other than that. The combination of the two would be much better. But the problem is that the second modifier wasn't amazing. Is it worth anything as it is? Probably not. Maybe like a co or something. I'm sure I've got like 1,000 items in here I could potentially show you. That's like a self-use small charm, fine charm, large charm of Vita. It's not quite good enough to be sold for value, but it's very good for use just as you're playing the game. In fact, let's go over to a character I know. Oh, there's actually a really nice one right there. That's a 3 max, 13 AR, 18 life. So this is not a 320-20. This is a 313-18, which is still very close to a 320-20. Probably still pick up an Ist rune for that, bare minimum. Because it has the right modifiers. So this is exactly what you would be looking for, but you would hope for better, which is your 320-20, and those are extremely valuable. But we got 313, which rolls between 10 and 20. And then we got the Vita, which rolls up to 20. So we're only 2 points off on the Vita. That's actually a pretty darn decent fine small charm of Vita. I think I might have to, like, loop that over to one of my Vengeance Paladins or something. Actually, I think I deleted my Vengeance Paladin. Now that I think about it. Alright, so time for some rapid fire. I'm going to show you some armor bases, and we're going to decide whether or not these are trash or treasure relatively quickly. First off, we have a Great Hauberk at 435 defense. 3 sockets. Non-ethereal. Trash or treasure? Neither. It's not really treasure. Is it valuable? Not really. Is it useful? Yes. You could throw a treachery in there. You could throw a hustle in there. You could just throw a couple things in there. You could use it for yourself. I would rate this as self-use. It's not exactly a high defense plate. One of the things that you could potentially do at any point is you can just do a quick Google search. You can find out, like, for instance, just type in D2R Great Hauberk. There actually is a cheat sheet floating around somewhere if anybody has a link to it, which actually lists all the armor values. But you can see that the armor value from this one is 395 to 501. This is a 435, which means it's mid-range. So for it to be a good plate, it would have to be a 501 Great Hauberk, and even then, not exactly the most amazing. Because there are better options that you could potentially use other than the Great Hauberk. But if it was a 501, you'd probably get like an Ist rune for it or something. I would see that. Moving on to the next one, we have a Wormhide at 365 with 3 sockets. It has a strength requirement of 84. Now, this is a relatively low strength requirement elite base. The problem with this is that the defense is just really bad. Yes, it could be useful for some bases, but in general, just not really very valuable. Although, you could always take it to the NPC and get 35k in the bank. Here's a Wire Fleece at 481. This is on 3 sockets. Now, 481's not bad. The strength requirement on the Wire Fleece isn't that awful. It's okay. Is it valuable? Maybe like a hull, something of that nature. Now we have a 3-socket Dusk Shroud with 384. It's very low defense, but it's also very low strength requirement. So it could be useful for a caster type. Does it have value? No, not really. Now we have a ethereal loricated mail with no sockets. This is 715 defense. So let's look up the loricated mail real quick, and let's see if that ranks as a high loricated mail or not. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We just need to see if the defense is a high value. Now, the easiest way to do this and you can just do this with a calculator, is you want to look up the loricated male and find out what the maximum defense value of a loricated male is, which is 496. Then you want to take your calculator real quick and just simply do 496 plus 50%. The ethereal nature of an item increases the defense by 50% base, which means that you end up with 744. So this is a 715, which is actually really close to the top end, which would make this a pretty decent armor. It is not socketed, though, which is a problem. So in this particular case, you would need to roll it. You could take it to the vendor and you could just simply Larzik it to 4, which would be a good fortitude base. But if you wanted to specifically use it for a 4-socket base, well, this wouldn't be, 3-socket base, then obviously 4 sockets isn't what you want. So it depends on what you want to actually put in the armor. Usually what you do with these, since they're not perfect and they're not really super valuable, is you just roll them, hope that they end up with the number of sockets that you want, or that is the most valuable to sell, which would probably be 3. And then you sell them. You could probably pick up an Ist rune, maybe even a little bit higher, maybe Gull. Although the market was kind of wacky last season, where like Gulls were less than Ists, and like it was all over the place. I don't know what to think about it. But is it valuable? Yes. Ethereal base, high defense, and it can potentially have the right number of sockets. Now, if you roll 2 or you roll 1 socket, it is worthless. You could potentially make a smoke for your mercenary if you get 2, but it's not going to have any trade value at 2. Let's move on to the next one. So we have a 3-socket Archon plate rolled with 496 defense. So let's take a quick look at the Archon plate. So the Archon plate rolls between 410 to 524, which makes this a halfway decent Archon plate. It's not terrible, but it's not the most amazing either at 524. 524 can make a pretty big difference with some of the rune words, especially the ones that give you a large amount of defense. You might be thinking, well, 28 defense? 28 defense doesn't make that big of a deal, but the problem is that you have characters like the Barbarian, you have characters like the Paladin, you have characters that are multiplying defense by massive amounts. Holy Shield, Iron Skin, Shout, so forth and so on. And, like, things get kind of crazy. 24 defense can turn into, like, 2,000 defense before you realize what's going on with all the plus bonuses and like level 50 holy shields and all sorts of other crazy stuff. So the higher this defense value is, the better it's going to be. And you might be saying to yourself, well, wouldn't it be better if it was in a superior base? Well, superior bases have their place too, but the problem with superior bases is they cost a lot to repair for armors. So in general, when you're looking at bases, a 524 non-superior could be more attractive to somebody who is avoiding superior bases, whereas a superior base is going to be a different story. So does this have value? Yes, you could easily pick up an Ist rune for this, if not, maybe more. Let's move on to the next one. A 2-socket Archon plate with 485 defense. 485 defense is still kind of a mid-ish roll. 2 sockets, not really valuable. What can you make in this? You could make a smoke. Useful early on, definitely. If I found this early on, I would throw a smoke in it in a heartbeat, and I would wear that until I got a better armor. But its trade value is relatively null. You might be able to get like a Co or a Pull for it, if you're lucky, and only early on. Here we have a 4-socket, ethereal, 15% enhanced defense Archon plate. Is this valuable? Yes, highly valuable. This is a very good, not perfect, but this is a very good fortitude base. What would be a better fortitude base? Most likely a higher defense base armor type, like a sacred armor or a shadow plate or something of that nature that has more armor than the superior Archon. The thing is that the reason why people use Archon plates is because they have relatively low strength requirement for relatively high defense. Well, your mercenary doesn't need that. Most of the mercenaries have pretty high strength requirement, or strength in general, and they can actually pretty much wear most of the armors anyway. But does this have value? Absolutely. This would be valued probably somewhere around like Ohm Sur, even if not Burrun, depending on the season, of course, but definitely in that particular range, somewhere around Sur Burr, I would imagine. Very, very good. And the reason why is because, well, it's ethereal, 15% enhanced, and 4 socket. Now, if you had an ethereal 15% enhanced with 3 sockets, that could be even more valuable because those are even more rare. Moving on to the next one, we have a Shadow Plate with 479 defense. Now, first off, before you even look at anything else, look at that honking strength requirement at 230. Nobody's using that. Yeah, it's an elite armor. Yeah, it has decent defense at 479. Not amazing, but it's decent. And it's 3 sockets. But who's using that? Your mercenary, I guess? Or your strength stacking barbarian. For the most part, an item like this has relatively no value. Well, it's just 35k in the bank, 35k in the tank. Here we have a superior sacred armor. This one is 1035 defense with 15% enhanced and 4 sockets. Probably one of the best fortitude bases out there. And as you can clearly see, when you compare it to the Archon, it's almost, what is that? A 132 armor more than the superior Archon. So when you look at something like this, you're looking at Burr Rune, maybe even multiple Burr Runes. This is a god tier fortitude base for a mercenary. This is something that you look for. You make your fortitude base for your mercenary in this, and your mercenary becomes a freaking god tier creature. Very, very valuable. Next on the list is a 15% enhanced superior mage plate with no sockets. So some people look at this and they immediately say trash because they don't know. So not all items in the game have the same number of max sockets that every single item does. These items are elite bases, and almost every single one of these elite bases has the ability to roll 4 sockets. This is not an elite base, this is an exceptional base. That's why it has a lower level requirement than something like the Archon with the same graphic at level 63. This is a 3 socket maximum. So what can you make in a 3 socket superior mage plate with 15% enhanced defense? Well, you can make Enigma. And that is one of the main and primary uses of a 15% enhanced defense superior mage plate. Now, you might not always want to make it in a superior base because some characters get hit too much and they got to repair their armor all the time, which then costs a huge amount of money. But other characters don't get it all the time and they don't care about it. So in this particular case, you would choose this. But why would you choose a mage plate over something like an Archon? Well, let's talk about that as well. So let's assume this one is 3 sockets as well. And you're looking at these 2 armors and you're like, oh, I do have a 3 socket one. You're looking at these 2 armors and trying to figure out which one's better, right? Well, this one has a 103 strength requirement and this one has 55. Enigma has a relatively large amount of bonus strength on it. So if you pull up Enigma and you look at it, Enigma comes with a bonus strength that scales based on character level up to bonus of 74, right? This means that as long as you have the minimum requirement of 55 strength to put on the Mage Plate Enigma, you will then get 74 more strength on top of that bonus. Which means that you end up with 55 plus 74, which is 129, and then you only need an additional 23 to put on your Monarch Shield. This is one of the reasons why people like to make Enigma into low bases, is because they can keep their relative strength requirement low, and then their relative strength low as well, and then that way they can basically have their bonus strength and use it to their advantage. Stacking as much strength as they possibly can. So Mage Plate ends up being a good choice for this. And some people actually even go as low as a Light Plate for this. A really nice 3-socket, 15% enhanced Light Plate for the same exact reason, which is keeping their strength requirement even lower, because the Light Plate has an even lower strength requirement than the Mage Plate. I think we can move on to... I don't even know. I've already been talking for an hour and 8 minutes, and I gotta say that I've covered a lot of topics. The problem is that there are 1,000 million things that have value within this game. Some people are talking about how most of the items in this game are useless, and I have to laugh because I think to myself, like, No, not really. Most of the items in the game are not useless, just that most people don't know the usefulness of most of the items. And that's kind of the entire purpose of this video, is to teach you that there are a lot of items in the game that do have value, but you have to have the experience to know why they have value, right? So, like, say for instance, you're looking for a weapon for your mercenary, your barbarian mercenary, and you come across a ethereal conquest sword. Ethereal conquest swords are extremely valuable for mercenaries because they offer a high damage output. You can put runewords in them, like Kingslayer, and you can put Plague in them and all sorts of other things in them, which can be really valuable for your mercenary, giving him high damage output while also allowing him to provide you with utility. Every single type of mercenary has their own, like, specific best in slot equipment. Take, for instance, Infinity. Right. So let's say you were going to make an Infinity character, and I don't know exactly which character my Infinity's on, so I'm just going to grab my actual Infinity self-wheeled character. And we're going to talk about Infinity for a second. So Infinity is a very powerful item. But what base do you make it in for your mercenary? Well, you generally want to make this in a faster base than anything else. The reason is because if you look, right here, this little special thing called 40% chance of crushing blow is the main reason why. Okay? When you make yourself an Infinity, you want the mercenary to attack as fast as possible because of this. Because if he attacks really, really fast, he applies crushing blow really, really fast. And this allows him to chew down monsters' HP by massive degrees. Doesn't even matter how much damage he's doing, and of course he is still doing really good damage, because if you make it in an ethereal base, which is what you generally want to do for a mercenary, because mercenaries don't need non-ethereal bases. They don't break equipment, right? So ethereal bases are very, very good for mercenaries in general. Well, so what are you looking for? Well, if you look at all the bases in the game and you start to go over them and try and figure out exactly which base is potentially the best, let's take a look at Ariat Summit. Pole arms. Now, in Diablo 2 Classic and Diablo 2 LOD, Diablo 2 LOD specifically, they did not allow you to make Infinity in spears. However, in Diablo 2 Resurrected, they do allow you to make Infinity in spears, so you have to check, right? So the fastest base in the category of polearms that has the ability for 4 sockets, so you have to exclude the Ogre X, is -10. So there are 2 -10 bases. There is the Giant Thresher, and there is also the Thresher. However, if we go over to the spear bases, you will find that there is a spear base in here that has -20. The -20 base, and it also is capable of 4 sockets, is the Man-Catcher. The Man-Catcher is the fastest base for the Infinity that allows your mercenary to apply that crushing blow as quickly as they possibly can. This means that your merc's going to get off as many crushing blows as possible and also be spamming some of that crazy chain lightning all over the place. But in general, just is going to apply that crushing blow better. On top of this, attacking faster just simply means he's going to restore his life better, and he's probably going to stay alive easier. Now, getting your hands on this particular base is a problem. So, if you just find a 4-socket Man-Catcher, nobody's going to want to put a 4-socket Infinity into a 4-socket Man-Catcher, so it's a worthless base. If you find an ethereal Man-Catcher and you take it to Larzik, it's going to get 5 sockets, so that's no good neither. You can roll an ethereal Man-Catcher to 4 sockets if you're lucky, or you can find it at 4 sockets. Now, if you do happen to find a superior one and you take it to Larzik, again, boo, only 5 sockets. So what's one of the most valuable bases with this? Well, this, when you're looking at the Infinity base, is you're looking for a 15% enhanced ethereal 4-socket, because you cannot roll an ethereal superior 15% enhanced 4-socket. You have to find it. So if you see a gray Man-Catcher on the ground, you pick it up. The first thing you do is you check to see if it's ethereal. Is it ethereal? Yes, no. If it's ethereal, then you look and see how many sockets it has, and if it has 4 sockets, then you are now golden, and you have a 15% enhanced 4-socket ethereal Man-Catcher, which could probably be sold for around a burr rune if you're lucky. And this is because anybody who's making an infinity, who's going to invest burr mal burr ist into a weapon, is probably going to also try to invest in a higher base. Now, does that 15% enhanced damage really give your mercenary that much more damage output? I mean, is it worth like a burr rune or whatever to buy that base? I don't really think so. But if you find one and you want to sell one, who are you to complain what they're spending their money on? Who are you to complain about this? Don't complain about them spending their money. They are spending their money on you. Smile and nod. Let me see if I got any more items in here. So these are probably worth like at least an ist. 320s. So 320s tend to be valuable, especially early on in ladder. You can actually shop these, believe it or not, but it does take like a considerably large number of tries and hell difficulty. 1,000. There's 1,000 items I could talk about, and why they're valuable and why they're not. And I don't like Greyford Wilted Armor. Is it valuable? No. Is it useful? Yes. It's very useful as a low-level life leech armor with resistances. Great for leveling up new characters. Lacerator, non-ethereal. Is it valuable? Not really. You could probably pick one up for like a co-rune or something, I guess. Non-ethereal versions tend to be relatively common. The ethereal versions, pretty rare and actually very valuable, especially if they roll with high enhanced damage. And a very good way to apply amplified damage to targets. Useful, but not particularly very valuable. Demon Machine, Chuko Nu. Useful? Yes. Very useful. Very good for the Enchants Orcs and Holy Fire, Strider Paladins, and various other characters that just like to have fun with exploding arrows and fire damage. Is it valuable? No. The reason why it's not valuable is because it generally tends to be in high supply, and the demand isn't as high as the supply. So there's a lot of these floating around. There's very little variables on them. I think there's like almost none. And you get one, and that's pretty much it. Like, you just move on. Bum 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 bum. There's got to be something. Oh, here we go. Here's a nice little shield. So this is a Sacred Targe, all res 45. So, is this worth something? Yes, 100%. This is a pretty much standard value item. Easily, you're looking at like low rune for this. Because it is a 4-socket guaranteed at Larzik. It is 45 all res, which is perfect. It is a Sacred Targe, which is the elite base. When I talked about telling the difference between like normal, elite, and exceptional, the shield's got to be one of the easiest ones to tell. Elites all have like sacred in the name. Well, most of them do anyway. The exceptionals, most of them have the like Ocarin in the name, and then the baby ones don't have. They got like nothing in the name really. It's just like Targe instead of the regular. So it's like Targe, Ocarin Targe, and then like Sacred Targe. Right? You can still tell by other reasons, but this particular shield definitely one of the better shields. If you found this early on in a ladder season, you could very easily get something for it. Early ladder season, you might have to compromise and just take whatever something can offer you in the highest runes that they have available. But later on, you're definitely looking at like low, if not even higher, maybe even Sir, honestly, Burr, depending on what you get on it. I mean, it's a very nice shield. 45 roll res is perfect. I could probably take a look at Tradery and do that. And speaking of like knowing the value of items, Tradery, I don't know if it's the best place to learn the value of items because Tradery seems to be all over the place and it's wonky sometimes. But let's take a look here. So let's pull up Sacred Targe. And let's see what the going price is for a 45 all res. So we're going to put in all resistances. And then we're going to type in minimum 45. Minimum 45, and then hit apply. And then we're not going to look at these down here because these are the ones for sale. What we're going to do is we're going to look over here for the recent trades. And as you can see, we have 1 jaw, 1 burr, 2 jaws, 2 jaw, 2 burr. We've got 2 burr or 2 jaw or 3 low, and so forth and so on. You can use this as a way to price check items, and you can see exactly how much the value of an item is. But do be aware that you might not always be able to get the current going rate for an item. Just because an item is worth, say, 2 burr doesn't mean that you'll get 2 burr. Sometimes what I like to do is I just throw the item up, let people give me offers. A lot of times I get troll offers, but then somebody will come in with some crazy offer like 1 burr rune, 1 low rune, like 2 ohm runes, and a Zod. And I'll be like, sure, that sounds fair, and I'll kind of work it out in my head to make sure it's fair. But like even if it's not fair, like the sheer quantity of runes that they're offering me sometimes can be more valuable itself than just the jaw rune. Jaw runes and burr runes and things like that are nice, but they're often very difficult to break down if you don't actually need that rune itself, like trying to trade that rune for the lower runes. So sometimes when people will trade you like a handful, like literal handful of runes of change, like sometimes that can be more valuable than getting, a little bit more value out of the item. I would highly recommend hopping on Tradery. Tradery is a really good place for trading. Like I said, sometimes the prices can be wonky. Make sure you have your platform checked, your mode checked, softcore, hardcore, and whether or not you are in ladder. At the beginning of a ladder season, it can be a little difficult because they don't clear out the old ladder sales. So you have to make sure that you pay attention to what day ladder starts and don't bid on any items that are older than the current ladder that you're in. Let's hop to some other characters here because I really want this to be a comprehensive video. And I know it's already an hour and 20 minutes, but yes. Yes. Let's take a look at yeah, penance. Let's look at penance. I believe penance is my two-handed Zealer. Yes. So Penance is wearing some very interesting equipment. One of them is a Death Colossus Sword, which is in a Ethereal Colossus Sword base. Ethereal Colossus Sword with 5 sockets can be mildly valuable. It's like around probably an ist. If you have like 15% enhanced and a bunch of other things on there, it could be more. My Mercenary isn't wearing anything too crazy. He's got a grief on him, though. He does have a grief. I do believe he has some decent charms, if I remember correctly. That's an interesting one. So all res 15 is the highest you can get on a Grand Charm, and 45 life is the highest you can get on the suffix. So I had a all res 14 with 21 life. Now it's not perfect on the all res; it's only 1 off, but it's not bad. The life could be a lot higher. But, I mean, that could probably still be worth like an ist, if not higher, maybe Vex. The main problem with these, though, is that they take up the places of other, like, better charms that you could potentially put in your inventory, so they might not always be valuable. This one, on the other hand, not as valuable because 26% extra gold for monsters and all res isn't as valuable as life. I also have... That's an interesting one. Lightning damage and lightning rose. There's a 3% faster on walk, 313. There's a 313.17. That's got a decent value. There's a nice one right there. Oh, man, I'm surprised I didn't sell that. That's a 319, 7%. That's a 1 off perfect. So it's almost a 327, which is a fine small charm. So 3 plus 3 max and 20 AR would be perfect. And then the good luck part, 7% magic find is perfect. So that is a actually pretty valuable item. Let's take a look on Tradery real quick. And let's see what that could potentially be worth. I am curious. So first we're going to look up small charm. We're going to look up better chance of magic items. I'm going to put in minimum 7%. Then we're going to put in max damage. Minimum 3. Have any sold? So there's a 315.7 that sold for an ohm, a 315.7 that sold for a gull, a 327 that sold for 2 jaw, 2 burr, or 5 jaw. I don't even know. It doesn't say which one it was. I hate when they have the multiples on there, but it sold for something good. There's a 327 which sold for 5 burr runes. As you can see, when you have something that's really close to perfect like that, it can potentially be valuable. Perfect being even more so. Torches. I could do a whole thing on torches. Torches generally tend to be valued based on class before anything else. So Sorceress being the most valuable, Paladin being the second most valuable, and then I think Assassin the third, and then going down from there with like Druid and Barbarian all the way at the bottom, like Druid, Necromancer, Barbarian. Like nobody cares about them. You can pick up like almost like a 2020 Druid torch for next to nothing. Like you're like, you got a 2020 Druid torch? I'll give you like a Ohm rune for it, and they'll be like, sure. You have a 2020 Sork torch on the other hand, and you're gonna get like a magnitude of runes for it, and just ridiculous number of runes. We had one season, and I think we got like 40 jaw runes for that Sork torch. I think I have a clip of actually finding it. Let me see if I can pull it up for you. Yep, here it is. Perfect Sork torch drop.
Right in front of my face.
Holy Jesus, it's so loud.
Get smitten.
Boom.
Yoink.
Beautiful. Yeah, we had no problems there.
Alright, and the torch is...
I'll take my source torch.
Holy Jesus.
Oh, a perfect sword torch? Holy fuck.
So as you can see, something like this, super valuable. And like I said, we ended up trading it for like 40 or 50. Again, it might have been 50 actually. I don't even remember. A lot of doojanks. That's what it was. A lot of doojanks. Overall, it really comes down to experience and knowledge of what is valuable and what is not, what is rare and what is not. I mean, if we were to write a formula that like a computer could follow for Diablo, it would probably look something like this. Like supply, low, mid, high, extremely high. And probably actually, we could put down here on the other end, rare. And then like extremely rare. And then we look at demand. So demand is very important because it doesn't matter how rare an item is. As an example, I can give you a super duper 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 ridiculously rare item. Like blah, 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 blah. Tyrael's Might, as an example. Tyrael's Might is an extremely rare item, but it is also not an item that is in very high demand. So when you think about an item that is extremely rare, just because it is extremely rare does not mean that it has a high demand, right? So the Tyrael's has very low demand, so nobody really wants it. I mean, it has mild usefulness on mercenaries, and that's about it. So for demand, we have extremely high, which would match up with extremely rare. We have high, mid, low, and extremely low. And then I would even put here non-existent. And what this comes down to is that you would rate something on both of these scales. So the first thing is how rare is an item, right? So let's take the Sork Torch, which is a 20/20, versus a Druid Torch, which is a 20/20. Both the Druid Torch and the Sork Torch at 2020 are extremely rare, right? They're both extremely rare. So why does the Sork Torch outpace the Druid Torch when they are both extremely rare? Well, the answer to this question lies in the demand. In this particular case, the Sork Torch is in extremely high demand And the Druid Torch is in extremely low demand. And this really just has to do with the fact that the Druid is, unfortunately, one of the worst classes in Diablo 2. It's fun to play, and there are definitely good builds that you can have a good time with. And that is not to say that, like, I hate the class or anything. It definitely is one of the classes that I have the most trouble having fun on. But I have created some very fun builds, like the Hurricane Gilbert character. But the thing is that, like, when it comes to these situations, understanding the fact that just because an item is extremely rare does not make it valuable. You may also run into situations where the demand on an item may be very high, like, for instance, let's say Ral runes. So let's look at Ral runes for a second, and let's say, okay, so how rare are they? Well, they're extremely common. They're extremely common. Ral runes drop everywhere. You can pick them up off of everything. But what's the demand? The demand is extremely high because they get burned constantly for caster recipes, which makes Ral runes extremely valuable. But because they have an extremely common drop rate, the extremely common drop rate offsets the extremely high demand, right? So this causes a problem. So how do you deal with this? Well, you basically deal with this by making Ral runes less valuable, but still important, which essentially puts it somewhere around the level of an item that everybody wants, but nobody wants to pay very much for because they're very common. So like 40 Rals or like 20 to 40, it kind of varies every season, is equal to like an ist. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you could potentially craft an item worth many burr rune with just one Ral, which is kind of the whole gamble of crafting, right? So essentially you're getting the Rals and you're crafting with them, and this allows you to have a chance at getting one of these god tier amulets. What would you potentially be trying to get? You would potentially be trying to get a +2 Sorc, 20% FCR, all res plus strength, most likely. I can't remember what the other stat you would really want on there, but honestly, just that by itself, like just like 20. I don't even know. It doesn't even have to be 20, but let's put 20 all res 20, and like any plus strength. It doesn't even matter. Just that alone right there would be multiple burrs. And that's just one of the many crafts that you could make. You could make a 220 barb. You could make a 220 like freaking paladin. 220 paladin would be really valuable as well because of the hammerdens. The hammerdens really like that +2 and the 20% faster cast. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm leaving out, and of course there's going to be stuff I'm leaving out, which is kind of why I'm going over the whole like demand and supply. The problem is that if you don't have a lot of experience in the game, you won't know, number one, how rare an item is. This is a lot of experience. Experience in knowing what is common and what is not. Like finding a +1 Grand Matron bow with 4 sockets is very common. Finding a 15% enhanced Grand Matron bow with 4 sockets is not common. That is extremely rare. And then finding it with +3 skills is even more not common. That is extremely rare, and that is where the value starts to come into play. The demand for items. The demand for items generally comes from the knowledge of... just fell out of my pocket. Generally comes from the knowledge of understanding how characters function. Right? So this is also experience-based. So the more you play the game and the more characters that you play, the more knowledge that you will have and the more understanding you will have of why a particular item is valuable, why somebody's interested in finding that item or paying money for it, right? Like, take, for instance, Assassin Claws. Assassin Claws can be some of the most ridiculously valuable items in the game. And a lot of people just don't know. I could bet you real money, like 10,000 real dollars, I would bet you that the majority of the people in the Diablo 2 community don't even know which claws are valuable, let alone to pick them up and check them. And this really just comes down to a lack of experience. A lot of people just have never played Assassins, and they don't know what makes a claw valuable at all. And I can kind of like vaguely go over this with you and try and explain it to you, but it really comes down to specific builds and specific use case scenarios of what you're looking for. Some of the more valuable claws in the game can be so valuable that they could literally buy you a car. That's how valuable claws can potentially be. And it has to do with skills. For instance, if you were to go to Anya and look for claws, you can shop at Anya. You can buy claws from her. She has claws in here all the time. And what you would be looking for specifically is a combination of effects. One of the more valuable claws is actually a claw that gives you +3 to lightning skill or trap skills in general. And then you also want +3 to lightning sentry specifically, as well as 40% increased attack speed. If you take that to Larzik, you get 2 sockets. Now you have a 2 lightning facet +6 lightning sentry claw, which gives you tremendous amount of damage. And they are extremely valuable. I'm pretty sure I could probably pull up an image of a +6 40% IAS trap claw to give you an idea of what they look like. So this is a cunning greater talons of the quickness. And as you can see, it is +3 traps, +3 lightning sentry, 40% IAS, which is what governs the trap laying speed, and +2 sockets, which we would, of course, put 2 lightning facets in. This item, extremely valuable. I can't even explain to you how valuable this item is. You find this item, it's like winning the lottery. Like, you've now won the lottery. You could actually probably sell that for real money and go fix your car or, like, remodel your house or something. Not even joking. And there are items like this all throughout the game that are just extremely valuable. Zinners was sending me some pictures of some of them, and they're really cool to look at. They're items that essentially just have extreme value because of how rare they are. And the combination of effects that go on them. You might notice that as I'm playing the game, I often pick up like pretty much every item I come across, rare items. I pick up like crystal swords and dimensional blades and like broadswords and stuff that you wouldn't even think that to pick up. And the reason why I'm picking those items up is because those items have insanely high values. You just don't know they have insanely high values. And the problem with that is that you don't know because you don't have the experience that you need to be able to tell that. And let me see if I can find these images real quick. Wah, wah, wah. I've got so many of them lying around, but Zinner sent me some really good ones from the like the god tier levels. So here's a really good one right here. This is a ghost glaive. So this is something that you could potentially upgrade from as low as a regular glaive. So any rare item can be upgraded to the next tier. And you can make elite items out of these. This one in particular is a 30% increased attack speed, 411% enhanced damage, +1 min, 164 AR, and it replenishes quantity. You wouldn't even need the replenishes quantity now with the Barbarian, because the Barbarian can just like replenish the quantity on his own. But if you're playing like a Javazon or whatever, you would still want the replenishes quantity for the damage output. But an item like this, extremely valuable. These are items that I constantly hunt for. Let me give you another example. I know I have at least a couple more in here. So here's another one. This is one that originally started out as a crystal sword. Yeah, a crystal sword. What a lot of people just walk by the way. If you see a crystal sword and you upgrade it, it's ethereal, and you upgrade it to the phase blade, it now becomes an indestructible crystal sword, even though it's ethereal. This is the only way, by the way, that you can have an ethereal phase blade is to have a ethereal crystal sword or ethereal dimensional blade and upgrade it into a phase blade. And as you can see, this one's 15% enhanced with 400 to 85% enhanced damage, 180 attack rating, dual leech. Pretty dang nice. It's 274 to 304 with one of the fastest attack speeds in the game. It's kind of a nutty, absolutely nutty phase blade. Here's another one right here. This is a Hydra Edge. Like, a lot of people will see me pick these up. Like, one of the worst bases in the game, right? But, like, look at it. 215 to 540 damage. It's 100, I think 100 plus damage over a grief on the top end. It's 412% enhanced, 20% increased attack speed, and it has 234 AR. It's not bad. Now, that's what's rep durability on it. These rare items like this that actually do exist in Diablo are things that just generally tend to be overlooked by most players because they don't pick up the items and they don't identify them. I've had a couple close finds of my own. There's a couple items, like, for instance, I found this item. I thought it was kind of funny. It's not quite there, but it's 366% enhanced with 256 to 368. What is it missing? Well, it's missing, the repairs durability would be really nice because that would save you from having to put a Zod in it. 40 or 30% increased attack speed would be really good. Fool's mod would be really nice on there as well if it had rolled with the high attack rating bonus. There's a lot of potential ways that this one could have rolled a little bit better, but it's still a very good roll for what it is, which is why I kept it. You can also find some crazy items that just are nutty for leveling up your characters too. And I have a couple of them on, like, my alternative account. Some of these items, like the ones that I've been showing you with the mods on them where they roll things like this, where they have, like, Cruels, Fools of the Quickness, Ethereal, replenishes, repairs quantity or repairs durability. Like, these items can be worth thousands of real dollars. And as you're running along in hell difficulty and you're killing things and you see something as simple as, like, a crystal sword drop on the ground and you don't even look at it, like, those of us who know, who have the experience, to know, like, what is important, are going to pick up that crystal sword. And what's the first thing that we're going to check when we pick up the crystal sword? You don't even have to look at it, right? So you're running along. Let's just pretend this is a crystal sword. You're running along, crystal sword drops. You pick it up, wave it in front of your character right here, right? I can see through it. It's ethereal. At this point, you know that this item is worth checking, right? So if it's not an ethereal crystal sword, well, then it's probably not worth checking. If it is an ethereal crystal sword, then it definitely is worth checking. At this point, you're going to get excited. Okay, you should be getting excited because you have something in your hands which could be that god tier item. You're going to identify it and you're going to look for the telltale mods. You're going to look for, number one, is it, cruel? Does it have the enhanced damage? Does it have the attack speed? Does it have the attack rating that it needs? Does it have repairs durability or replenishes quantity? In this particular case, with a crystal sword, this is supposed to be a crystal sword, you don't need to repairs durability because when you upgrade the crystal sword into the phase blade, it is now indestructible. So you don't have to worry about that. So now you're just looking to see, does it have the cruel? Does it have the fools? Does it have the increased attack speed? And of course, there's other mods that you might want, like dual leech or various other things. And these items do exist, but the thing is that a lot of people just don't check for them. They run along, they see an item fall on the ground, they're like, that's a crystal sword. There's no way that could be worth anything. Now, I originally got requested to make this video. somebody asked me, they were like, how do you always know what to check and what not to check as you're running through the game? How do you know like which items to look at and be like, hey, that could be really good, or like, or man, look at the you ran over and you picked up this item and I never thought that would have been good in 1,000 years, and you're like, oh my god, look, I found like a diamond in the rough, and I'm well, basically what he told me was he didn't think that the item I was picking up was even going to be worth anything at all, right? And that's kind of the moral of this entire video, is that I'm trying to teach you how to tell the difference between something that is not worth something and something that is. And it really comes down to experience. The more experience and the more characters and the more builds and the more fun that you have with the game, the more you begin to understand why something is valuable and why somebody would pay so much money for it. Like, for instance, in Path of Exile 2, there's a character that builds damage based off of accuracy. And if you didn't know that there was a character that built damage based off of accuracy, then you wouldn't know that that particular item is going to be worth anything. So you might find an item that has high accuracy on it and not even know that you have a gold mine in your very hands. Speaking of gold mine, that's a really nice charm, 18 life, fire res of 10. It's not perfect or anything, but it's 2 off perfect on the life and it's 1 off perfect on the fire, but that's still worth easily like Vex maybe. And a lot of that happens in this game. Claws are a big one. Claws are a really big one. A lot of people just don't know about claws because they never play Assassin. If you've never played an Assassin and you've never messed around with claws, you don't know anything about claws. You don't know anything about the Mosaic claws. You don't know anything about the Trapper claws. You don't know anything about like the pre-buff claws and things like that that have value. Like, a lot of people will look specifically for like a Shadow Disciplines with like +3 Shadow Disciplines and like +3 Fade or +3 Burst of Speed or something, or +3 Venom, specifically so they can have like a +12 like pre-buff set, which is insane. Like, if you have +12 to Fade or +12 to Burst of Speed or +12 to Venom, it's kind of nutty to actually have like a pre-buff set like that that just absolutely annihilates. Point savers are a big thing on claws. So a lot of people don't know about point savers. Point savers are huge. So if you find a claw and it has something like Dragonflight, look at how many points you got to go down to get to Dragonflight. You got to go 1, 2, 3, 4 points to get here, right? Well, if you can get Dragonflight for free, well, then you don't necessarily need to put 4 points in, right? So you can save those 4 points and you can get Dragonflight for free. Another one that people really like to have is Mind Blast, but Mind Blast requires 1, 2, 3 points to get down to, and a lot of the times people will grab that as a point saver as well. Shadow Master and Shadow Warrior can also be point savers if you have no intent of actually putting multiple points into them, and again also require 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 points to get to. So you can save 5 or 6 points, well, somewhere around there anyway, if you want to use some point savers in that direction. Death Sentry is also a very powerful ability, and it's something that a lot of the assassins like to use, even if they're not trap assassins, because it gives them the ability to add Corpse Explosion into their mates. Well, Death Sentry is also a very powerful point saver. So a very powerful point saver claw would probably be something like +3 Death Sentry, +2 or 3 Shadow Warrior or Shadow Master, and plus to Dragonflight. So finding a claw that has all 3 of those on it can be a payday for you. You can get a pretty good price for that, especially as like a Mosaic claw or something. Speaking of claws, there's also a very powerful market in Blade Fury and Blade Sentinel trap claws. So these require ethereal weapons with high damage. That's the reason why I have this little thing in here, which is a Plague Claw Battle Cestus. It's not exactly the highest damage output. However, Blade Fury does not burn durability, so you don't need things like repairs durability on them. So if you can find an exceptionally high damage ethereal claw that has like +3 to bad Blade Fury, and I can't remember what else, you can actually get some pretty insane damage out of a claw. I think it's like one of the highest damage claws in the game is a very, was it +5, I think? Yeah, I think it's +5 Blade Fury, high damage, Ethereal Claw that you can essentially just use to fire off massive amounts of damage with your Blade Fury. It changed a bit ever since they added the synergies. It used to be like F-Death, but then it moved over to the Ethereal God tier claws, which are like next to impossible to find. But if you do find one, money in the bank. I don't know, it's been a while since I took this girl out. She missing any equipment? Man, she slapped them. She slapped them boys now. She threw shurikens right in their neck, and they just like fell straight into the dirt. So here's a blue lion helm. What would you be looking for in a blue lion helm? The answer is you would be looking for, plus the skills, you would be looking for good modifiers that make it better than an Ariat's, which is going to be very hard. In most cases, when it comes to this particular item, it's just not going to happen. You would need like +2 Barbarian, +3 Battle Orders, +3 Shout, something along those lines. Maybe even like +3 to find item or something really to throw it in there, so sweetener, and then somebody might use it. Even then, if you're looking for that kind of helmet, like you generally want a blue one because you can get +6, whereas the rare ones you can only get +5. There are some halfway decent helmets you can find, but a lot of the times that when the helmet slots, Barbarians has a lot of helmets. They got a lot of hats. They got Ariats. They've got the IK helm. And they've got a lot of other good choices that they can potentially use as well. It's a Flesh Ripper. Not particularly high damage, though. Other items that have moderate value. So, like, as you're running along, you can always craft items. I usually pick up items for crafting. Like, for instance, this is a Vampire Fang belt that you can craft into a caster belt. Sometimes I'll pick up amulets when I'm inside of Terror Zones if they're high enough level for crafting into caster amulets. They're not necessarily valuable on their own per se, but they are items worth picking up just simply to craft with so that you can try and make something good for later. Shaft Stop. Shaft Stop is one of those items that it always has some mediocre value in its base form, but if you find an ethereal one with good enhanced defense, and you upgrade it into its elite form, it actually has a pretty good value at that point. A nice ethereal shaft stop, upgraded, socketed, and with the right runes in it, can make a mercenary next to unkillable in the frickin' cow level, because they're mainly physical damage anyway. And yeah, absolutely excellent armor for. Usually, I put it on Lightning Fury Amazons. Because if I want my mercenary to survive cows, he needs as much physical damage reduction as he can get. A very powerful armor for cow survival. Well, I've been talking for nearly 2 hours about this. I hope that I've given you at least some level of knowledge on the topic. How many of the, like little questions that I asked did you get right? Were you able to figure out whether something was worth something before I told you the value of it, or were you wrong? I'll leave this one for you. This will be a one that I want you guys to answer. If you guys make it this long into the video, I want you to put down in the comments the answer to this question. It's going to be a really simple question. All right. What type of item is the most valuable in the game? Blue, white, rare, unique, set. Which one is the most valuable? Which category contains the most valuable item in the game? Is it A, white items? Is it B, blue items? That lined up nicely. Is it C, rare items? Is it D, unique items? Or is it E, set items? Now, I'm not going to give the answer during the video. I want to see what you guys think. I want to see where you guys' brains is sitting, whether you guys understand which items in the game can be actually the most valuable. And just put down in the comments which one you think it is. I'm very interested to see what everybody has to think, and how many of you guys are right. I'm also interested to know how many of you guys are right in this question. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining. I hope I have enlightened you at least a little bit. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And I'm sorry I have been missing the past couple days. I've just been horribly sick, and as I say that, I cough as if on on cue. As always, keep watching.